Pizza Jaffa's orange rose, microchips us, iPhone cameras us, taco salads us, Boba Rababos us, Olive Garden us, White Foster us, Sabra Hamas, Hasbara sus.
Hello and welcome to Bad Hasbara, the world's most moral podcast. I am your host, Matt Lieb, the world's most moral host, I suppose. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of this podcast. If you're listening to it on Spotify or on Apple Podcast app, give us 5 stars and a review, please. It helps people see it. It does something to the algorithm. People see it and they're like, oh, what's this? And they listen to it. And that helps me. Also helps me when you listen to the podcast, because that's the only way I can monetize, because YouTube doesn't allow me to monetize it because I keep saying crimes out loud. There's certain crime words you can't say that YouTube looks at and tells me that ads won't happen. And then also the theme song's background music is apparently someone else's. So anyways, point is, listen to the podcast. You don't need to look at me. I'm ugly as fuck. But if you insist on watching, if you insist on being here on YouTube, please support me by going to the new Patreon that we have, patreon.com/badhasbara. You'll get every episode of this show, plus some new shit, occasional bonus interviews and stuff. I don't know. At some point, I'll do bonus content, like a lot of it, and you'll be so happy. For now, my shit is very busy. I got a baby. Life's hard. I got other jobs and stuff. But support me. Patreon.com/badhasbara. Finally, Sacramento Punchline. That's right. It's a comedy club in Sacramento where me and my wife, Francesca Fiorentini, that was a Borat voice, sorry, will be co-headlining. That is March 17th at the Sacramento Punchline at 7 p.m. There's a ticket link in the bio. Please, come buy tickets. Tell your friends. You all come together. It's, St. Patty's Day, so you can get drunk. You can fucking laugh at some stuff. It'll be fun. So please come out. Join me. Okay, today, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else, we have a hell of a show. It's going to be a lot of fun, is a bad word for it, because there's not a fun subject, but interesting and occasionally fun. Today's main subject is called Hitler, I Just Metler. I'm so sorry. AKA how Israel is using allegations of Nazism to justify preemptive Nazism. All right, so let's get into it. To begin with, here's a quick Israeli government civics lesson. Did you know that Israel has a president? No, not Benjamin Netanyahu. That's the prime minister. I'm talking about president. In this case, his name is Isaac Herzog. And you might be wondering, what the fuck does a president do in Israel? The answer is nothing. The president and presidency is a mainly ceremonial position. It doesn't really do anything, has no executive function. It's been offered to people who are not Israeli. Both Elie Wiesel and Albert Einstein were both offered the presidency at one point, and both of them denied it. They turned it down because, they were like, that's weird. I thought this was a democratic country. From what I can tell, the presidency is mostly used to put a more liberal face on an increasingly fascist state. Every Israeli president has been part of or associated with the liberal Zionist Labor Party, except for one. There was one Likud party president who became, a Likud member who became president of Israel. His name was Moshe Katsav, and he was the first Mizrahi Jew to be elected president. That's Middle Eastern Jew, for those of you who don't know. He was also the first to serve 5 years in prison for rape. Yeah, so That's a story for another time. But the point is, it is a ceremonial position with no executive function, and it does almost nothing. I say almost because it does do one thing. There's one thing that the president does, and they excel at it. That's right, Hasbara. So speaking of Israeli President Hasbara, on February 17th, fake President Isaac Herzog posted a video of himself on Twitter tweeting, "On the stage of the Munich Security Conference, I revealed to the viewers around the world the anti-Semitic book written by Dr. Mahmoud al-Zahar, one of the founders of Hamas, which praised the Holocaust, a copy of which was found in a house in the Gaza Strip by IDF soldiers." And I have that video here.
This book was written by Dr. Mahmoud al-Zahar. Dr. Mahmoud al-Zahar is one of the founders of Hamas. He's a well-known Hamas leader and a political figure of Hamas. And the book mainly hails the Holocaust. It hails what the Nazis have done and calls for a nation to follow what the Nazis have done. We have to have a coalition of all of the moderate forces in the world fighting this ideology.
Oh, word? Damn. Never mind. Forget that whole ceasefire thing. You can kill everyone. Feel free. Because, if there's one thing that we can all agree on is wherever you find that book, wherever you find it, it should absolutely be decimated by bombs, gunfire, and death. Unfortunately for the fake president of Israel, Twitter user Ali Lakrakbi found that book in the National Library of Israel. That is correct. That book is in Israel right now. He found it and then, posted it online. And if you'll notice there, it is not written by Dr. Mahmoud al-Zahar. No, in fact, it is actually written by someone named Abu al-Fida Muhammad Aref. And so this Hasbara was quickly exposed by the Quds news network, who tweeted, according to pictures shared by the Israeli media, this book is authored by someone called Abu al-Fida Muhammad Aref. It was first published in the 90s and printed in 2 Arab countries, which do not include Palestine. So apparently the author is Egyptian, and it was published in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and it was published in 1990. So this is another lie. Easily debunked by a quick Google search. Well, maybe not quick, because, if you were to Google search it, first you have to scroll past dozens of articles from news outlets that reported this bullshit as fact, like the Jerusalem Post, like the Times of Israel, like the New York Post. So that first, but once you scroll far enough, then you find that book and its actual author listed in the National Library of Israel. But let's look beyond the lie for a moment. I only care a little bit that they lie. For me, the question is, why do they lie? Let's say it's true. What does he want you to take away from it? It's not breaking news that Hamas wrote a book that's anti-Semitic, right? That wouldn't, if it was true, that wouldn't be breaking news. Nobody would be surprised by that information. It's something that, in fact, I assume someone from Hamas at some point has written a book about hating Jews. That doesn't, shock me or anyone. But that's not what Herzog wants you to remember. What he wants you to remember is where the book was allegedly found. In a home in Gaza, as he said. Not a Hamas barracks, not a Hamas compound, not a Hamas command and control center. A home in Gaza, just some dude's house. And in fact, it's Gaza, so it's not just some dude's house. It's probably a multi-generational family home, because that's how it works. So he is saying, and he's trying to convince everyone that this house, that the men, women, grandparents, and children are legitimate targets because they had this book. Now, this kind of Hasbara has been around for a long time, but it's everywhere now. I feel like every week there's a new video of some IDF soldier in Gaza holding up a piece of literature being here's some anti-Semitic literature that I found. Here's one that happened early on that is just, It's just fucking insane. It's an Israeli soldier who sounds a lot like an American soldier, by the way, who found a dedication to the martyrs in an anatomy textbook. And here it is.
When we say that Hamas instills hate towards Jews and the state of Israel, we're not just saying it. Take a look at this book, for example, Anatomy and Physiology. So what would you expect to read about in this book? Stuff about anatomy and physiology. So you open the first page, it's a cover page, and look at the second page right here. Dedication. We dedicate this work to the souls of the Palestinian martyrs who sacrificed their blood for Palestine and Al-Aqsa. So this book is dedicated to the terrorists and to the martyrs who committed terror attacks in Israel.
Okay, so, all right, listen, this would be, I think, personally, a lot more convincing if you couldn't see the part where you folded it and clearly put it in your pocket at some point and took it out and unfolded it and stuffed it into a book. Like, completely just try. They're not even trying anymore. It's embarrassing just to watch just the low effort Hasbara. But there it is. Listen, I'm just saying, it's like, you can't do this thing where you keep going like they're teaching their children to hate Jews. It's like Israel is literally, you're teaching your children to bait Jews. You're teaching them to tell Jews, oh, you know, this whole population, they all want you dead. Not just us here in Israel, but you at home. And I don't think that's a healthy thing to teach them. So in the last few months, it feels like there's been video after video of an IDF soldier allegedly finding little Hitler Easter eggs all over Gaza. For example, here's this tweet that states, Nazi propaganda from infancy. IDF soldiers found Hitler's book Mein Kampf inside a children's room in Bet Hanun, in the Bet Hanun neighborhood in Gaza. Yeah, that's right, inside a children's room. Or this video that went viral of an Israeli soldier who, according to Hasbara, who shared it, found a charged iPad in a Gazan teenage girl's bedroom. And this was on the cover of it. And here we go.
נראה שלאיזה נערה מתבגרת. עכשיו, מה אתה חושב ש... קבל.
Hey. Yes. You know, the point of this video is pretty clear, if you can't tell. It's to make you focus more on the Hitler and less on the fact that what the hell is a random Israeli soldier doing in a teenage Gazan girl's bedroom that has been bombed to shit, you know? And then they discover the iPad later, and I'm sorry, but it's got like 88% charge. Well, this is a lot to believe. But, you know, this is kind of their way of saying, see, even their kids are Nazis. And this theme of tying children and Hitler together has been something that's been happening throughout this the last 4 months. I mean, it's been happening throughout this entire quote unquote conflict. But it's really picked up speed recently. But the big one that I found was fake President Isaac Herzog on November 12th. So, you know, barely a few weeks into this atrocious genocide. He put out this video shared by the Hasbara org Stand With Us, where he found another book.
So this is Adolf Hitler's book, translated to Arabic, Mein Kampf. It's the book that led to the Holocaust and the book that led to World War II. Well, this book was found just a few days ago in northern Gaza in a children's living room, which was turned into a military operation base of Hamas, on the body of one of the terrorists and murderers of Hamas. And he even marked, he wrote notes, he marked and learned again and again Adolf Hitler's ideology of hating the Jews, of killing the Jews, of burning the Jews, of slaughtering the Jews.
Again, this would be a lot more convincing if you couldn't see the fresh post-it right on the brand new book that you took off an allegedly dead guy. Also, is this a Hamas base or a children's living room? And what is a children's living room? And why mention children at all? Like, what is the point of that? And I think that's pretty clear. Like, that's the truly demented part of this whole thing, is it's like, these videos aren't about proving that Hamas are Nazis. It's about proving that every single Gazan is a Nazi, including their children. Like, this lie is repeated over and over and over again, as if finding a book written by a genocidal maniac justifies preemptive genocide. That's not a thing. Preemptive genocide is not a phrase. It's just called genocide. You know, knowingly targeting civilians is a war crime, no matter what ideology you accuse them of having. So when it comes to the Israeli government, you don't actually have to go and bomb their homes and rifle through their bookshelves to find proof that they are genocidal. They'll just tell you. So this is a quote from President Isaac Herzog that today's guest, Owen Jones, pointed out was cited as evidence of genocidal statements at the ICJ. And I have that right here. We are operating militarily according to rules of international law unequivocally. It is an entire nation out there that is responsible. It is not true that this rhetoric about civilians it's not true, this rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved. It is absolutely not true. They could have risen up. They could have fought against that evil regime which took over Gaza in a coup d'etat. But we are at war. We are at war. We are at war. We are defending our homes. We are protecting our homes. Blah, blah, blah. I'm evil. So, man, you know what? Good stuff. Very, very good stuff. He should write a book. He should. And then he should plant that book in a Palestinian child's bedroom. All right. Our guest today is a socialist, political commentator, YouTuber, and frequent target of Hasbaras all over the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome the wonderful Owen Jones.
Hey,
what up?
How you doing?
Hi.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How
How you doing? Do you know what? The world's gone to shit. Well, more to shit. But I'm on your show, which is great. So a little from column A, a little from column B.
You know, listen, you gotta find the silver lining somewhere. It's like, yeah, there's death and destruction and everything sucks and all of our political institutions are useless. But at least we can podcast sometimes.
Exactly. What I'm trying to say is you're basically in my emotional life raft, and I'm going to cling on. I'm going to cling on for dear life. So don't sink. Don't fuck it up.
There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure, buddy. Oh, fuck. Yeah. No, listen. Hey, you can always, if you're ever feeling sad, if you're ever feeling hopeless, come on this podcast and, you'll still feel sad and hopeless, but at least you will have talk to someone.
Oh yeah, I took that as read. Don't get me wrong. I took that as read. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, I'm in the abyss, but nonetheless, some solace. It's all relative, I think.
Yeah, and so you're in Athens, Greece right now. I think that's got to be nice. What's it like out there?
Do you know what? I think Athens is, I don't know, I was going to say it's underrated, but I don't know what I mean by that, because it's not like everyone's just slagging off Athens. It's like well known. Yeah. It's not like people are fine about Athens.
I know. I talk shit about Greece all the time. So, let's maybe say something positive about Greece.
I know. Come on. Leave them alone. Just
leave them alone. They're just living.
They got overrun by the Roman Empire, then the Ottomans. Jesus, let them. Yeah. Do you know what? I think it's warmer than where I grew up. But I'm from a town called Stockport, which it basically is as it sounds. Rains 28 days. Got a very nice viaduct, but that's your lot. But this, instead of a viaduct, it's got the, oh God, what's it called now? God, what's it called?
The ocean?
What's it called? The big structure. No, it does have an ocean.
Yeah.
No, the Acropolis. The Acropolis, which is.
I don't even know about the Acropolis.
Don't know about the Acropolis. Come on now. I mean, I didn't remember what it was called myself, but come on.
But you got there. I would have never got there. I said the ocean. I'm a fucking idiot. But so like you're there, and I've been watching your videos now. Now you're someone who, for me, like I'm new to you. I discovered you after the 7th. Once I started going down this like rabbit hole of basically just trying to find anyone out there who was actually going to report what's actually happening, in Gaza and in Israel. And I found your stuff, and I have to say, I'm a big fan of what you do. You are one of the, for me, a fresh voice of reason with a British accent, because I don't know if you've noticed, but I feel like half the Israeli Hasbaras are British. And it's just so usually when you hear someone talking about Israel with a British accent, at this point, I am just hearing just like Elon Levy and like just all the ghouls. And so it's nice to hear.
Another of our great British exports. Yeah, I love that. We won't stop just constantly exporting horror.
Yeah.
I thought there was this meme on the internet a while ago, which was like how Britain sees itself and how the rest of the world sees itself. And it's like how Britain sees itself as like this genteel man, like drinking tea with a top hat and just being terribly polite and all the rest of it. And how the rest of the world sees like a crocodile, like an alligator, which has just gone on the rampage, just exporting genocide. I think genocide is something Britain has always been very good at, and then pretending it never happened, just going la 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 la. No, that's fine. We built the railways in it. We might don't talk about killing tens of millions of Indians. We built railways, okay?
Exactly.
Remember the railways.
Listen.
Elon Levy. That's the worst one, though, isn't it? It's one of the worst ones yet. We really have hit rock bottom.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I almost feel like bad for the rest of Britain, because I'm just like, this guy he's everywhere now. He's like I feel like if you're someone who's into this subject, who's like been watching the news, he seems to be everywhere, and he seems to have made it his mission to make the social media position at a company be something that like where you sell your soul for it. Like, listen, people work doing social media for all sorts of weird shit. I'm sure Lockheed Martin has a Twitter account, but when you're running the cover for a genocide, holy fuck, man, that can't possibly be worth it. But he seems to thrive.
I don't get it. I don't get it as well, because I don't know if you said, well, we've all seen Mark Regev. So Mark Regev, he's Australian. Speaking of settler colonial states, no, but he's Australian, and he actually, I can see what they're trying to do with that guy. He's the former Israeli ambassador to Britain. He's kind of a smooth talker. I can see what's going on. Elon Levy, I think you can tell he's got this just heart of darkness. He just comes across like, I mean, he's so British. I mean, he's just so British, but like he's too one-dimensional to put in a film as a bad guy. You just be like too on the nose. Do you know what I mean? You'd kind of think, put 100%. In some complexity, less clear malice. And I just think, they need, if I was the Israeli government, I would just maybe flesh him out a bit more, give him more of a character arc.
He should have been focus grouped a little bit, because so far I feel like they're trying to sell us on his, the fact that he raises his eyebrows. Like they're trying to memify him. It's the weirdest thing, where I've never seen such a concerted attempt at like trying to make a celebrity out of someone with zero charisma. It's just like,
well, also, you know what? It's funny because I don't want to be a backseat driver selling a genocide. I can
absolutely
imagine that. That's tricky. It's not. I don't.
I mean, hindsight is 20/20. I know everyone has their way of doing the cover for genocide.
Exactly. So It's easier to critique than to do it. But I had a very good friend of mine went to university with him, and if you Google Elon Levy, all I'm saying is, I don't want to be overly personal, just because what he represents is just obviously so hideously egregious on its own terms. All I'd say is just Google Elon Levy from 2013, 2014 at Oxford, university, and you will see what's happened there, because it's quite the transformation, is all I'm saying.
Oh yeah.
He was seen as a bit of a kind of, he was like a bit of I think a nerd is being generous.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a little bit of like overcompensation, you think, happening, where he's like, I'm going to be a tough guy by tweeting about every time someone shows an atrocity from Gaza.
Yeah, that's the thing, because
like,
I think this.
I wish we didn't have to do this, but whatever.
Yeah, because there's different types of nerd. Like, I'm a bit of a nerd. I wasn't trying to like go on a kind of like nerd critique, but there's kind of like, I like to think there's lots of sweet kind of nerdy types, and then there's like who you can imagine just pulling wings off flies, and I think that's.
Yeah, he's got
the difference.
Yeah, it's the nerd to incel pipeline energy, where you're just like, you start off just really liking comic books, and then you end up being so mad that women like comic books too, that you're like, you just go full fucking incel. And he's got the energy to me of someone who knows you know what he has as a comic, he has what I would say is open mic overachiever energy. He's got this the person who has decided what stand-up is when you go on stage and wear a suit. Like, he doesn't have like charisma, he doesn't have a comedy voice, he doesn't have any good writing, but what he has is like a suit. And he has one thing that he does, which is raise his eyebrows, and he's decided that's how he's going to sell these war crimes. And I find him like so detestable and yet so entertaining, because I as opposed to seeing him as a total villain, I see him as a villain. I also, behind his eyes, I see this like I feel like, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know British people that well, but I feel like he has a deep sadness to him, where I feel like he
I hope so. Yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Maybe it's like me being optimistic, but I feel like in his tweets he will live to regret every single moment of this. And there's like, I see behind all of them just someone with the saggiest, eye bags, just like sitting there with a 5 o'clock shadow, just typing "Israel has a right to defend itself," over and over again. And and maybe that's just my hope. Maybe he's.
Do you know what? It's funny you to say that, because earlier, I was thinking about this in the shower. I don't know why I need to say that particular detail, but just as a bit of context.
I like it. Now I'm thinking about you in the shower.
Well, I thought I'd spice things up a bit. But I don't know if you ever sometimes just start pitching film ideas in your head. And I did think of this kind of like Israeli propagandist in a film who just has this massive crisis of conscience and just goes on and then realizes what they've done. I think though with him, because he started baiting me occasionally, which I just generally ignored. But then I replied to him saying something like, it might take 20 years, it might take 30 years, it might take 40 years, but you are definitely going to go to jail. And I think I just think for me, because the reason I say that is, to be honest, I've been thinking about this a lot, because it's comforting, isn't it? Because he's just such a,
it feels nice.
He's selling genocide to a Western audience. But if you read the Genocide Convention of 1948, because obviously genocide, it makes clear as a punishable crime, but obviously it talks about other punishable crimes such as public incitement and complicity. Right. And I just think if you're going to be the PR guy trying to convince a Western audience to support a genocide, then I think that applies. And I just think this crime is too big, too extreme, and Western public opinion actually, despite his, or maybe partly because of his attempts, is shifting dramatically ahead. That I just think in the future, is he really going to get away with it? And part of me thinks maybe he won't.
Yeah, no, I honestly, deep in my, heart, I still have like a little bit of optimism in me that there is some justice in the world. And so, as cynical as I've become, because here in America, we just, it's like, if your crimes are big enough, you get away with them. And I think that is, made us all cynical. Like watching the fact that like Trump it feels increasingly likely will be reelected, where we all are just kind of like resigning ourselves to the fact that, like, yeah, some people are just allowed to do crimes and say they're doing crimes and then just be president again. Like, it's just part of it.
Yeah.
But deep inside, there's part of me that believes, yeah, it is possible, because I mean, it wouldn't be the first time in the world that someone has gone to prison and convicted of cheering on genocide. Like, this has happened before. I know it happened recently with I don't know about recently, but with a I think Belgian. What do you call a Belgian? Is that a Dutch? I'm from America.
Yeah. No. So
What's a Belgian guy called?
Well, you've got a Belgian's fine. I think they
Belgian.
That.
Yeah, I'll call him Belgian.
I suppose what you were going for is you've got your Wallonia, which is your French part, and then you've got your Flanders, and they speak Flemish, which is kind of Dutch. But I wouldn't. If I said that to them, that they would probably get quite angry about that. A Belgian is fine. A Belgian's fine.
Yeah, no, I wish the reason that I didn't know was because I was like trying to be specific. No, it's because American school system. I don't know where things are. I know there's a map and there's lines in them, but yeah. So he was someone who became a huge star in Rwanda, and was one of the people who was cheering on the genocide and was actually trying to, basically doing cover for it and trying to incite. And he faced consequences, and I do believe it is possible that, I mean, if anyone is going to face consequences for rhetoric in this, like, Elon's top of the list for sure.
Well, I'll give an example because the point you made before is like, why are they saying, when it comes to lies, for example, and there was an example last week, which wasn't Elon, but just as one example, where all of a sudden the Ministry of Defense in Israel released what they said was footage of the Palestine Red Crescent treating a Hamas militant from the 7th of October after they'd, I think they'd killed Israeli soldiers. I think that was the argument. And they said, and they put that out. It turned out it wasn't the Palestine Red Crescent at all. It was the military health service or something, the internal military service of Hamas. It was nothing to do with the Red Crescent whatsoever. And whatever we think about Mossad, they're not stupid. They obviously knew that. And even the Times of Israel had to retract, but the Ministry of Defense they've kept it up on Twitter and all the rest of it. And the question is, why did they put that out then? Well, they put that out because they've just destroyed the health system of Gaza, and they had just targeted an ambulance which was sent to save a 6-year-old girl, Hind Rajab, blew up, killed its paramedics and her family. And so they were suddenly going, they're Hamas. But the point about Elon Levy, so he released this clip of him chatting to, someone who's a former Israeli politician. Yeah. And in it, what the whole point of that discussion they had was to take on the idea of a clear demarcation between the Palestinian people, Hamas. And they even went to great lengths to say, well, that actually Fatah are basically accomplices of Hamas, that Hamas is just rooted in, that's what they argue, it's not a joke, that Hamas is rooted in the national fabric of Palestine. And it's not true when Western audiences say, well, actually, that Hamas don't represent the Palestinians. They just talk about the Palestinians, and they in that casual way about being Hamas. And the point about that is it's really important to make the point because of what you said there earlier, because when they say we don't target innocent civilians, we don't target civilians who aren't involved, the question is, I don't think they really think there are any innocent. So they're not lying when they say that. Do you see what I mean? Their view is that, why are they, as you say, why do they suddenly talk about children having Nazi books or whatever? I mean, you had this segment on Israeli TV where a former senior Mossad official said all Palestinians over the age of 4 were collectively guilty and were Hamas supporters. So, I mean, the argument they're trying to make is we don't target innocent civilians because, well, actually, we think Hamas and the Palestinian civilian population, you can't really demarcate the two. So when I watched that clip, why has he decided to put that particular segment up? Well, because there's increasing growing horror at the fact that, including those buried under rubble, 36,000 plus Palestinians have been killed, including over 14,000 children, and they're losing the public relations battle. So they're increasingly putting out clips going, do you really want to feel sorry for these people? Because they're all Hamas extremists. And I think Yeah, that's the point, isn't it?
I mean, it is crazy. Just the phrase alone, and I'm sure it's used, not just by Israel, but just the phrase "innocent civilians" is always it's a funny little qualifier. The idea of the innocent part, just because you go like, well, wait a second, isn't a civilian by definition someone who is not a combatant? like the idea is like, no, we don't target innocent civilians. But it's their way of saying, innocent. Well, what is innocent? I mean, if you have
define
a book,
innocent.
Right, define innocent.
Yeah,
if you're someone who's in a house that has a bad book, then are you really innocent? And that is,
Well, that's the thing, because they're like, everything is Hamas. So, I mean, look, literally, the UN, the healthcare system, children,
food,
all Hamas.
Recently, there was an article from the Washington Post that was interviewing a lot of people who were protesting the aid that was going into Gaza, Israelis and such. And one of the things they pointed out, and has been pointed out by Israeli officials, is there are different ways in which foods can be used to make bombs. And I was just like, wait, so not only is aid Hamas, but food is Hamas as well. Like literally eating is Hamas. So yeah, it is. There's a level of tying things to Hamas that, I mean, from the beginning of this, recent incursion has been everyone's, I think, rightfully called out. Like just, oh yeah, everything is Hamas. But instead of like realizing that line wasn't going to work, they just doubled down to the point at which they're going, everything that is not a Zionist is Hamas. Which,
well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because it is, on one hand, just so laughably ridiculous, but that shows the genocidal element of it, because their stated aim is we need to just wipe Hamas out completely. But when it's clear there is no demarcation between what they consider Hamas and anything. That's why, it's funny actually, 'cause I got Gary Lineker, who's a national sweetheart in Britain. He's the most famous sports personality, basically. Okay. He's a sports presenter. I'd call him basically a well-meaning, middle-of-the-road liberal who probably just, doesn't like innocent people being killed, which is an extreme position to have.
Yeah, right. I was like, you mean a Nazi, Owen? That's what Nazis are now.
That's what Nazis, look, Nazis are people who oppose innocent civilians being murdered en masse. So anyway, he took the Nazi position of opposing mass murder. And basically what I did is I interviewed this Israeli American associate professor of Holocaust and Genocide studies called Razi Gal. He's brilliant, a brilliant guy. And he called this a textbook genocide because he said rarely has intent been so overtly spoken. And he was just the fact people just keep saying genocidal things, citing Amalek, and in which God orders the killing of all men, women, children, and livestock, or human animals, and then to justify cutting off all means of sustenance to a civilian population. I mean, it's just endless. But I put out a clip of it, and Gary Lineker shared worth 14 minutes of anyone's time. This literally caused a firestorm in which Gary Lineker, but I thought this was quite useful because he was then accused basically of being, people started, because he works at the BBC, so the reports were, well, Jewish employees obviously don't feel safe working with Gary Lineker. But it was it was helpful because people had to put what actually happened in. Because people then had to read, oh my God, what's this anti-Semitism that he's done? And then they had to read, he shared a clip by an Israeli-American associate professor of genocide and Holocaust studies. Yeah. And I just think maybe that didn't really land in the way maybe they listened to that and thought, I think that guy probably knows what he's talking about, actually. Yeah. It's not classic anti-Semitism, is it? If you're a Israeli-American professor of Holocaust and genocide studies.
There's too many, I think, just logical hoops to go through in order to be able to take a regular person and have them learn what he did and go and end with, he is a Nazi. It's like, it's an Israeli professor of Holocaust studies, and all he did was share a clip. But people, have been getting doxxed and fired and, otherwise punished just for sharing clips. And it is, so it's nothing new. But I think what's new is the amount of people who are not the amount of people who just don't agree with the punishments that people are receiving for this stuff. Like people are starting to kind of speak out against the idea of blacklisting and censoring people. And
I think that's totally right. Yeah.
No,
well, it's just the scale of the crime. The scale of the crime is just. I just think it's too big, isn't it? I think that's the issue. I think, I just think. I think that worked for a long time, which is why actually, to be honest, I'm increasingly just so angry with people who are silent, because you're right. Yes, of course, there is always the risk when you speak out in support of terribly extreme ideas like don't slaughter innocent people and the land should be shared on the basis of equality and justice between Israelis and Palestinians.
All right,
very
you're gonna
very
get
scary.
me demonetized here, dog. What are you doing? Next, you're gonna say that there should be a single secular state that everyone gets a vote. If you say that shit, I'm gonna fucking have to leave this country.
It's true. I mean, so you get like people listen to that and go like, yeah, obviously, fine, you're gonna, and it's stupid. This is so irresponsible because actual anti-Semitism is growing, but obviously, which we need to take seriously. But you will get accused of terrible things. But I kind of think if you've got a public platform and you're not using it to speak out against your own government facilitating one of the worst crimes of our age, I'm kind of pissed off with you, actually, to be honest. I'm questioning your moral integrity as a human being at this point.
I agree completely. And I actually, it's one of the reasons that I so much appreciate your work, because if I'm right, you're not Jewish. Is that correct?
No. I mean, I have Jewish cousins, but never speak about that. Just because it comes across as...
Right. No.
Well, Jewish cousins.
Well, I've got Jewish cousins. It's like, my best friends are Jews or whatever. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
No, totally. But I mean, so personally, I find it always like refreshing when someone who is not Jewish, I mean, particularly someone who is Arab and has a platform, or is, Palestinian and has a platform, because they are often the first targets just automatically to be smeared as anti-Semitic. But also, I mean, just, with you being someone who's not Jewish and being passionate about this issue and like getting into it and really talking about it, and like not pulling any punches, one of the things that I've seen in the way Hasbara attack you is they will call you an anti-Semite, which is something that, as a Jewish person who talks about this, I mostly get self-hating Jew. Occasionally I get like, oh, you're not Jewish enough to talk about this or whatever. But, the smears of anti-Semitism that you've had to endure have been, I'd probably...
Yeah, but I mean... Yeah, I mean, but, I'd never present myself as some sort of victim in that sense. I mean, partly,
Sure.
In my own head, because I just know it's ludicrous, I think anti-Semitism is an incredible evil. It's responsible for, within living memory, the attempted extermination of the Jewish people of Europe, for 2/3 of whom were exterminated. And I also think it's so important. It's important to take on its own terms, because it's such a tremendous evil. But also, until the Jewish diaspora feels safe, that's a critical part of how we end this whole nightmare. Because obviously, the collective trauma felt so much by so much of the Jewish diaspora is so real. For very obvious, which is throughout history, there's a sense of, like if I think of, in France in the late 19th century, where Jewish French people felt safe and accepted. Sure. Liberty, égalité, fraternity, that was the thing.
Right.
And then you got the Dreyfus affair, where you got this massive surge of anti-Semitism. Or in interwar Germany, that was the most integrated Jewish population of Europe. And then what happened? And so I get, that sense that I think non-Jews like myself always have to engage with. There's a sense of, throughout history, there's a sense of we're accepted or we feel safe. And then suddenly the winds change very quickly. And now, we need somewhere safe to go. And that's something which, has to be engaged with in a kind of, until Jewish people feel safe everywhere, then obviously the claims of the Israeli state will have an appeal to so many. That's just inevitable. And I just think... So when I listen to that about anti-Semitism, because it's always something I've tried to take very seriously, it's something I've been very educated by the milieu I'm in, and I stood at the railway tracks in Berlin, which took 40 members of my best friend's family to be exterminated. They were shot in the forest of Latvia before the gassings began, and I just think that and I just think at the moment, thinking of that, because his family are from Germany, or what was then Germany, but I think is now Poland.
Right.
It's just seeing how Germany has gone, do you know what? We're responsible for this hideous historic crime, which is within living memory. We're going to make now the Palestinian people pay for it. And also we're going to arrest and silence Jewish protesters, which they keep doing. I just think it's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it's completely insane. It's completely insane. And, I think what's interesting and what I think you do so well is you do a great job of contextualizing and also separating the idea of anti-Semitism and the idea of anti-Zionism, or at the very least criticism of Israel. I'm personally wondering, like, what got you interested in this issue, and is it something that you at one point avoided, or is it something that you've always been passionate about?
To be honest, growing up, for me, like, a big influence was, I know I'm going to sound like even more of a cliche, so Noam Chomsky was a very big impact, had a very big impact.
It's okay, I'm not a leftist hipster. I'm not just like, Noam Chomsky, come on, man. Everybody says Noam. Yeah.
But he did. There's no getting around it. So, I'm from a leftist family. But so what I did for a while, I'm a PhD dropout. But what I was interested in is I was studying American history, and I was interested in what I regarded as the crimes of Western imperialism. So, a big impact on me. I spoke about Britain's tremendous exports. So, for example, there's a brilliant book called Late Victorian Holocaust, which is about how tens of millions of Indians starved under British rule because of famines, which were completely avoidable. Ireland, half the population of Ireland was starved or forced to flee because of the British rule in the 19th century. There's other examples. There's a brilliant book as well called Britain's Gulag, which was about Kenya in the 1950s, when the British locked the Kikuyu tribe up in concentration camps, killed, tortured tens of thousands. It's something which most Britons have no awareness of. But in terms of American history, Vietnam and all of that had a big impact on me. So what I was always interested in actually was Western, its complicity in crimes which its populations at home don't know about. So it's something I've been actually very vocal about in terms of in the here and now, which is quite interesting because it's often used as a preemptive gotcha against people who haven't just used Google, which is the Saudi onslaught against Yemen. So I've been to a Yemeni refugee camp. I did a documentary there. I've written about the Saudi onslaught against Yemen, which is armed and backed by Britain and the United States, in which you have British intelligence units embedded in the Saudi military. And for me, the whole point of that is that we are directly complicit in that horror. And the reason that gotcha is so stupid, by the way, or tells how damning this all is what's happened to Yemen is horrific and it needs more attention. Although the people who suddenly realise Yemen exists are people who only want to use Yemeni deaths to downgrade Palestinians. Right. But it shows the scale of the crime, because Yemen's population is much, much bigger than Gaza's population. And a higher percentage now of Gaza has been killed in a few months than have been killed by violent means, but also by other indirect means in war in Yemen over 10 years. Yeah. So actually that gotcha doesn't work. But the point I'm making is that's what I mean. For me, it's a case of, this isn't about specifically, obviously I care passionately about what's happening to the Palestinian people based on the generations of suffering. But for me, it's more about the West. This happens in our name. Right. We have leverage over what our governments do. So when they start coming up with other random conflicts, it's like, well, that's terrible, but Britain isn't arming and supporting that. The US isn't arming and supporting that. Everything Israel is doing is on us. And I interviewed Diana Buttu, a brilliant Palestinian Canadian lawyer, and she said this is an Israeli-American attack as she sees it. And that's the point. We are collectively complicit because our governments arm and back it. They're doing it in our name, and we've got leverage over what they do, so we should speak out because we can stop what's happening from happening. That's the basis of what I believe, basically. Completely agree with you. And I think that's a great point that more and more people are starting to take away, and it's why you're seeing an increase of people who
aren't Jewish, who don't have the, I don't know, even people who don't have like the educational background in this, still speaking out because they're seeing what's wrong. They're seeing crimes take place, and they're going like, I may not be Jewish, but this is my government that is also making me, by the very essence of being a taxpayer, complicit in these horrible war crimes. And I'm not going to allow that, because this is supposedly a representative democracy and we're supposed to have a voice. And yeah, I do see something, it's like, I feel like Israeli, like the right wing in Israel, to me, I see it as a mixture of both American and British right-wing ghoulishness. Like you've got the like British like colonial like attitudes of the officials, who are in charge, the Israeli government, and then you have the American like, I'm going to take a wedding photo with a fucking M16. Me and my wife and my baby, we're all going to hold American-made guns as wedding photos, or, fucking Hanukkah, greeting cards. Like it's a perfect mixture of like MAGA guys and Brexit guys, or, whatever.
It's totally. Do you know what? That is such a key point, because in terms of the accusation of anti-Semitism, which, as I said, because anti-Semitism is such a real and terrible danger which has to be fought, and then the way it's used to shut down people who fight what are terrible war crimes and injustices perpetrated by the state of Israel, it's complete. They've got it completely the wrong way around, because the whole point of anti-Semitism embedded in European culture is this idea that they are the other. They're not Europeans. Yes. They're the other. But the problem, the way those of us who are critiquing and opposing this horror, that we're not looking at Israel as the other, we're looking at them as us. We're looking at this basically as a Western state which is responsible for unbelievable, unspeakable horror. So they've got it, it's the complete opposite of the critique. It's not the othering of Israel that leads to the movement which is across the Western world. It's not the othering of Israel, it's this is us, as in a Western state, waging war against an indigenous people who are suffering a genocide. So it's the complete opposite. So you're right, I do look at them. A lot of it is echoing a lot of like it is an echo, a lot of it, so much of British kind of, settler colonial projects throughout history. There's a big echo of that. But you're right, it's got as well now this kind of maniacal kind of American fuck you, we don't give a fuck about the world, right. There's this football team here called their motto is no one likes us and we don't care, and it's a bit kind of like fuck you all.
No, 100%. And you see it a lot in Israeli society. The idea of like, well, if the world doesn't agree with us, then fuck the world. And this is a very American outlook, kind of disguised as like I see this a lot of like kind of a revisionism when it comes to a lot of these attitudes towards the international community. Like the idea, Israelis will be like, this is what we've always said, it's us versus the world and stuff. And I'm like, no, you're taking this from right-wing Christian nationalists. This is that talking point.
So much so.
Yeah, and you're not, this is not part of the like the writings of fucking Theodore Herzl anymore. Like he at least admitted he was a settler colonialist. Like you are just doing right-wing Christian nationalism and then saying things like, well, fuck the world, we're number one. And the danger there is that unlike America, which is the fucking biggest army in the world, the most well-armed, the biggest economy, Israel is a country in the Middle East that is very, very powerful. But as someone who is a Jewish person and is like, I also do not want Israelis to fucking die in mass atrocities, and everything the Israeli government does seems to bring them further, like closer and closer and closer to something of that nature happening, which is like one of the most insane things about it is like this careless attitude of like, whatever, what are you going to do to us? Like, to me, it just, it doesn't make them safer. I mean, if I'm an Israeli, I'm like, I would be like, what the fuck are we doing, guys? Like, why are we like, the entire society can't be as confident as the most insane person in some settlement in the West Bank. Like, I just don't believe that. So I look at this and I go like, this is, it's too cocky. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, on that as well, this is definitely not my lane. But I mean, I guess it's that question, isn't it? Which is, has Israel made Jewish people safer either in Israel or abroad? I guess is
the answer to that
question. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, it's just difficult to.
I will say unequivocally no, and I think, like, you know, you were talking about earlier, like kind of reconciling the idea of American, Jewish past trauma and like kind of trying to be sensitive to that because of the fact that, you know, we have these very real historical traumas and present, you know, traumas and aggressions and stuff. There are people who hate Jews. Anti-Semitism is a very real thing. And, you know, the problem is that the solution of Israel is not a solution. And that is something that I think more and more Jews are waking up to. It's like, wait. So yes, any country at some point can turn on a population. Historically, Jews have been a population that countries turn on, and you know, that's part of this fear. The solution that I've seen put forth by Zionists seems to be like, you know, well, luckily Israel exists, and it's like, what does that even mean? To do what? What exactly is going to stop a gang of anti-Semites in Fresno from like murdering a Jew? Like, how's Israel going to be involved in this in any way? It seems to like be based on this idea that either you are going to, you know, run to Israel or flee to Israel before it happens. It's just like, it makes no logical sense. And also the idea that a state in and of itself containing every Jew in the world is the safest thing to do. I'm like, that seems like when all the eggs are in one basket. That's a phrase we say. Like, this doesn't seem to be a safe thing.
Yeah, you know what? No, on that, I mean, it's a great phrase. But on that, for example, I mean, this is something I had, to my shame, I knew nothing about, this historic example. So I knew about Argentine's terrible dictatorship. I knew they were horrible right-wing dictatorship, which threw leftists out of helicopters and terrible, unpleasant things like that. What I wasn't aware is that Argentine's junta disproportionately killed Jewish people. So this was in the 70s and 80s, and they killed Jewish people at 12 times the rate of the number of Jews who lived in Argentina. So it's like 12% of those killed were Jews compared to 1%. And a lot of the Argentine junta, like they basically did Nazi shit. You know, like they had Nazi stuff. They praised Hitler. They just did full blown Nazi stuff. And I didn't know that. And actually, I didn't know there was a significant Argentine community in Israel who did flee Argentina because of that. What I didn't realize is Israel armed that junta. And I guess the reason I bring that up, because it killed up to maybe 3,000 Argentinian Jews were killed. That I just think that itself just is, if Israel was functioning at that point as, look, whatever happens, we're here as a refuge for Jewish people, to defend Jewish people no matter. But they prioritized, because their view there was actually they were part of a coalition, a global so-called anti-communist alliance involving the United States, you know, Britain, which is why they were allied with, for example, apartheid South Africa, because they saw us at bulwark. And so the priority of the Israeli state there wasn't how, above all else, of course you can't arm this junta. What the fuck? This junta's killing Jews disproportionately. That clearly is an enemy of the Jewish people. We need to fight it. They were, well, actually, we're part of an anti-communist bloc, and therefore we need to arm this junta. I mean, that itself I just find, and I didn't know about that history. So it's an insane thing, and it's like one of many examples, of course, at different levels of
intensity, but of Israel prioritizing the continuation of their state and their project over the safety of Jews living in diaspora countries, living in the diaspora, living not in Israel. And it is become increasingly obvious that the choice there is incredibly calculated, because it fucking accomplishes two things. Number one, it helps them, with their allies or whatever. It helps them grow stronger as a state. It also helps their case, which is their case is like, oh man, other countries sure do hate you. Move to Israel where we will protect you. And that kind of shit is like, this idea of goes like directly in the face of the idea that Israel makes Jews safer. More on this subject, there was a tweet recently that I'm going to put up by someone named Joss Sheldon.
Yeah,
and he wrote this. Let me pull this up. There we go. So Joss wrote, if I was a white person in South Africa, I'd have opposed apartheid. If I was a German in the 30s, I'd have opposed the Nazis. If I was alive at the time, I'd have opposed the British Empire. But I'm a Jew, so I oppose Zionism.
Oh, yeah.
We must all challenge power and say, not in our name. To which Elon Levy, back again.
There he is. Oh, is he? Oh, is he back again? Is he? Always a pleasure, never a chore.
Oh, he's
like
back,
little ray
baby.
of sunshine.
Oh, our beautiful boy is back. Our beautiful boy says, if you were a German in the 1930s, the Nazis would have murdered you, but a strong, independent, sovereign Jewish state would have saved you. So this is an insane thing to say. The idea that Israel, the existence of Israel, had it existed in the 30s as a strong, independent, sovereign Jewish state would have saved you is just, it's completely ahistorical in terms of, like, first of all, you're inventing the existence of Israel.
There is that.
And you are also like what logistically? I mean, at this point, I'm not even talking about like the rhetoric or just kind of like the idea of safety wrapped in a state, but logistically, what would have happened? Would they have been airlifted? Like this complete fantasy idea that Elon keeps like putting out there, and that all Hasbara do is that, like, man, if Israel was around, Holocaust would have never happened. And it just doesn't vibe with the realities of what happened during World War II and during the Holocaust. And it also seems to be expressly like tied to this idea of every single country at some point will eventually be this Nazi state, and you should just accept it and move here now. And I find it to be like abhorrent, because it's just, again, it's like this constant revisionism of Nazi atrocities. And I just like, Elon's always around saying some of like the worst shit ever, and the fact that he attacks you regularly just makes me respect you all the more, Owen.
Yeah, but again, it's just more of this, like, how much of this is Britain just like, come on, Britain, just stop.
Yeah.
We've got like at the moment, like transphobia. We keep just stop exporting these things. Just come and do something. We should have just stuck to like cream tea, or like
I know, or
I don't know,
chips.
like being overly apologetic, like saying sorry when someone walks into you. That's fine. Like just not being able to say what we actually think, and that being occasionally charming but also quite irritating. That's fine. But less of the just really egregious, terrible, nightmarish shit. And I'm afraid to say, it looks like I kind of hooked to it. So it looks like we're just going to. It looks like that tradition is just here to stay.
I mean, you guys are just.
He won't be the last. He won't be the last.
Yeah. I mean, listen, there are some good British people, and you're one of them. So you need to feel good.
I'll take it.
I just, in general, when it comes to like just this idea of like, if Israel doesn't exist, then no Jews are safe. I mean, this is something I've talked about constantly on the show, and I find it to be just the most absolutely offensive and anti-Semitic and completely defeatist for any Jew in the diaspora to believe this. The idea that like no matter what you do, your government, will eventually turn on you. I mean, it's just like, because you're coming from a point immediately of like, well, then fuck it. Then why try?
Yeah. Because I think, again, if I was in my little lane, as a queer guy, I'd be like, well, imagine that the idea you just, like, for my view is like, well, obviously you've got to keep fighting until every society is free of anti-LGBTQ bigotry, so that people, I wouldn't be like, well, that's never going to happen, so everyone has to decamp over here. Because we never ever. I mean, that to me is like the most miserable, defeatist possible approach.
Completely.
I don't know why that. Yeah.
I mean, it is, and it just, that's by definition it's defeatism, because it is it's trying to paint the eventual rise of another Jewish Holocaust, another genocide against the Jews, as inevitable rather than something preventable. And it's saying, the only way to actually prevent it is if there are no Jews left in other countries and we all move to Israel. And it's just so clearly, part of trying to bolster the Zionist project of Greater Israel. And it's also just so ahistoric, because you go like, well, I mean, what happened with the junta in Argentina? What about all the anti-Semitism that's growing in Hungary, and the fact that your government is cozy with Viktor Orban? Like, what about the?
Well, exactly. The anti-Semites for Israel. Yeah,
yes,
like Orban, clearly anti-Semitic, the most anti-Semitic regime in Europe.
Yes.
But on that as well, I went through. This was, I can't remember, it was about 20 Israeli soldiers who were killed together. This was a big incident a few weeks ago. And it turned out one of them, it was much commented on, it turned out he was from indigenous Peruvian background, I think.
Oh, right.
And then at a US Congress, a Republican congressman said, look, this fallen Aztec, whatever. And it was quite interesting, because some Peruvians then wrote, there's no such thing as an Aztec. What are you talking about? There's like indigenous Peruvians. But I went through this kind of like rabbit hole. Someone did. It was quite interesting. There were some scholars who went through a kind of rabbit hole about this and the history of what had actually happened, because it's quite curious. And it was odd. This is what happened. So basically, there was this group of indigenous Peruvians, and some rabbis from Israel went over to Peru and converted them all en masse to Judaism on the promise that they would have to immediately leave and go to Israel and settle. And the reason that was given for why they had to do that is that middle-class Jewish society in Peru looked down at them and treated them with contempt and snobbery, and therefore they then settled in the West Bank, and they were taken straight from the airport to West Bank settlements, and they were then settled on land on the basis that they were indigenous to the land of what is now Israel, taking land from Palestinians. And the basis for it was that they were treated with social disdain from Peruvian Jews who actually had some very long-standing Jewish heritage. I don't know. It was difficult to get my head. It was difficult to get my head around that particular claim, because that wasn't a claim about Jewish safety. And by the way, this is all there's a Guardian article about it, which it spells out in those terms. It was, I don't know. It was confusing, and that as an example.
That is such a crazy idea. I love the idea of the best way to convince people about Jews being indigenous is to just convert indigenous peoples of other countries and move them and go like, well, I'm a Jew and I'm indigenous. Not to here necessarily, but who's being specific? That's pretty brilliant. But yeah, I mean, it's insane to think about the amount of the rising tide of anti-Semitism across the world, and look at Israel. It's insane that Israel would be like, man, if there's anyone who can protect you, it's us. And as
But that's what worries me about the the irresponsibility of throwing, because it's so obviously on the rise. I mean, you can see that in terms of the sort of attacks, hate crimes, but also the rise of far right movements, which clearly have deep, profound anti-Semitic heritages and streaks. And I do think that's why a lot of people, there is a responsibility, I always think, on the side of those who aren't Jewish, who support the Palestinian cause in the global north, to take on anti-Semitism and to confront it, and not to, because the danger is when it's used by apologists for the Israeli state, in a way that it is abused, then people, there's no such thing as anti-Semitism at all. But there is. Right. I mean, there's just, it's a great evil. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, it just waters it down. And that's like, that is, I think, one of the things that I fear about it is the fact that it's both rising and it is stoked by Israel very deliberately, and simultaneously it is a smear that is being weaponized by Israel to a degree in which people are saying things like, well, there's no such thing as anti-Semitism. And it's just like, this is bad. This is bad for me. And I'm not trying to obviously make this, fucking atrocity that is the continuing Zionist project about me. But I am saying that it does concern me, the fact that Israel would absolutely let Jews be unsafe throughout the world in order to bolster their cause, which is not. It's not because
I've been to Hungary. I've interviewed the dissidents, the opponents there. You've got this authoritarian regime which obsesses over George Soros being a Jewish puppet master, pulling the strings behind the opposition. And the polling in Hungary when it comes to anti-Semitism is one of the worst in the whole of Europe. So it's not like they don't know what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? They don't. And the history of what happened in the Holocaust to Hungarian Jews was, what the worst, basically, of almost any. And you just kind of think, what the fuck? And it's that, I guess there's that long history. Richard Nixon, who was very anti-Semitic, very pro-Israeli, in public. Donald Trump, constant anti-Semitic tropes.
Yeah. I mean, fucking Elon Musk, you see, he's opened the floodgates for any Nazi on Twitter to exist and say the worst possible shit. But then, he will make sure that his algorithm is just, Hasbarists being pushed. My timeline is just lie. And it is, so clearly Israel is helpful at running cover for anti-Semites, because at the end of the day, they know that their project is an inherently right-wing, Western, chauvinist, colonial project. And the people who like that type of shit are right-wingers who usually kind of hate Jews. So it's they're like, well, whatever. I mean, as long as someone's got to support this shit. But yeah, before we leave, I want to ask you something as you're a British person, and
all right, we've established. All right, I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do about it. We're stuck with it.
But why do you call it football? It's soccer. No, I'm just kidding. That's not the question. No, I want to ask, what's going on with Piers Morgan? In America, we don't know him. We know of him. He tried to.
We don't know her. Sorry.
yeah, exactly. We tried to. We watched him take over for Larry King at one point, and then kind of it got canceled and all that stuff. We know him as kind of just this kind of bloated, right-wingish, pompous guy who's just I hate Meghan Markle, and it's not because she's black. Yeah, I don't know. I can't do the accent, but it's probably something like that.
That was amazing. That was whatever that was still beautiful.
It's me, Piers Morgan. Yeah, David Beckham. Fish and chips. No, but what's his deal?
I'm good. Whatever happens, I'm gonna play. That's gonna be my ringtone after this. That's gonna be just on
Piers
repeat.
Morgan, David Beckham, fish and chips. Oh shit, my mom's calling. But like, it's been interesting seeing him in, you know, I don't know, the last 3 months or so, because he seems to be, and I shouldn't gauge any, you know, British politics on him, I assume, but I can't help but like think he represents some population in the UK. He seems to simultaneously be someone who runs cover just like any other, you know, Western journalist for Israel. But at the same time, he does something that I feel like you don't see everywhere else, which is like he's platforming people on his show that and kind of for the most part letting them finish a sentence, except for you. I think he interrupted you
He did
a bunch
me
of
a lot,
times.
yeah.
But
yeah, he said to me at one point, "You can't say that." I was like, "Is this uncensored?"
Yeah, that was my favorite. That was my favorite part. You're like, "I thought this was uncensored." He's like, "It is."
Yeah,
that was great.
I think it's funny with him because we've had I think lots of conversations in the past. He was on Good Morning Britain, a morning TV show.
Right.
When he went to Talk TV, they invited me on his show a lot, and the reason I always said no was because I'm self-aware enough to know I'm like a culture war prop for a lot of his audience. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
That I'm kind of there. I'd be there just to be like, here's a culture war. We're going to put, you know. So I was like, I'm not going to play a part in this clear performance. So I just always said no. And then when Gaza happened, they kept getting into obviously the horrors of 7th of October and everything that happened since. They kept asking me to come on. And I always said no then because I was like, well, the last fucking thing I want is Gaza to be a culture war. Like that would be like the worst possible combination.
Right.
But the reason I went on was because he became like what I would describe as an accidental ally. In that, the guy, I would say it's fair to say, would he disagree with this? I think he likes clicks. He likes an audience.
For sure.
And he kept putting on pro-Palestinian and Palestinian voices who just did really well. They obviously did really, really well. So he became an accidental ally just because actually that channel became one of the best places for pro-Palestinian coverage. And then, to be honest, I spoke to Palestinians I know, including a Palestinian who lost is the wrong way of describing it. His relatives were killed en masse by the Israeli state. And they said to me that I should go on. Because the other thing is I was like, well, you know, I do panel shows where Palestine comes up, but I wouldn't normally go on a TV show if they're like, Owen, we want to talk about Palestine, will you come on to talk about this specifically? I normally would avoid that because I would try and promote Palestinian voices. On a panel show, it comes up, we talk about it, or a news review, that kind of thing. But so the reason I went on is because it was like, he'd had Palestinian voices on and pro-Palestinian voices. They actually did really well. And I spoke to Palestinians who thought I should do it. But I don't know, I mean, I think it was more that, I don't know. I'm torn about what do I think is going on in his head, and I don't spend that much time thinking about it. I think deep down he knows actually this is fucked. Like this is so fucked up. It's so obviously twisted.
That I get the sense that he like deep down knows it's wrong and fucked up, which is I think is shocking to see from you know, such like I don't know, such a bloated British man. You know what I mean? Like the guy like does not exude someone who gives like deep thought into the lives.
No, exactly. And I'm not letting him off there. I'm not.
Of course not. Of course not.
No, because he's clearly not coming out and you know, like, and I think, you know, he's got his right wing audience predominantly as well. Sure. I mean, the thing is as well with me, you know, his argument was that Russia's onslaught against Ukraine constituted genocide, but Israel's didn't. And he basically made that on the basis of, well, basically, in this case, Hamas started it, and in that case, Russia started it. And now, obviously, that's a historical, the world clearly didn't start on the 7th of October. But also, on its own terms, it's nonsense, because the basis of whether or not something's a genocide or not is it a genocide? It's not who started it. Otherwise, in Rwanda, you had the Rwandan... the army led by Paul Kagame, who invaded in 1990, committed multiple atrocities. No one would there go, well, that means 1994 genocide wasn't wasn't a genocide. Equally,
Right.
the Bosnian Serbs suffered terrible atrocities committed against them, but that doesn't mean. So that is just a logical nonsense. You know, it's either a genocide or it isn't a genocide. It's not how did this start, even if you're going to start the clock arbitrarily in the way you do. I mean,
yeah. I mean, it's again, it's this like idea of normalizing the phrase, you know, preemptive genocide, you know, like the idea of like normalizing the feeling, rather, you know. I don't think anyone is actually saying preemptive genocide, but that's essentially what they're implying through these like acts of quote unquote defense. You know, it's like, well, you know, they say they're genocidal, and so what can we do but kill literally every man, woman, and child? But I can't tell whether or not you know, Piers Morgan represents a swath of people in the UK or not, who maybe are like, you know, pretty like right wing.
I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
No, actually, because in fact, let me just bring up the latest polling, because the latest polling is actually it's you know, I know in the US there's been a big shift compared to where things were. If I just bring up the latest polling, it is the what I find so just, well, all of this is fucked up, but it's the fact that what is seen as extreme within the media environment is seen as completely mainstream amongst British public opinion. Yeah. So now 66% of Britons think Israel should immediately end military action and call a ceasefire. 13% oppose it. So there's only 13% of the population oppose a ceasefire in Britain. Do you think Israel, this is incredible, do you think Israel should or should not be prepared to enter into peace negotiations with Hamas? 66% say yes, 11% say no. If you said that on British TV, you'd probably, I don't know, be arrested or something. Then it says, do you think Israel's attack on Gaza from October onwards is not justified? Israel is not justified. So this is from October 7th onwards, that whole attack. 45% say it isn't justified, 24% say it is justified. So the point I'm making is actually, and then now, which side do you sympathise with most? Palestinian side 28% up 7, Israeli side 16% down 2, both sides equally 22%. So what the point I'm making is actually, you know, the problem is actually the media environment in Britain is absurd in that it's all framed like, I saw that Labour being forced to shift their position in a way which is actually very disingenuous and cynical, but they've been forced more towards at least pretending they support ceasefire. And they were I watched Sky News interrogating their shadow foreign secretary, and it was all like, oh, what about the hostages? How is Israel going to save its hostages? And I was like, look, we should, like, firstly, why aren't you talking about the fact the vast majority of hostages have only ever been released because of a ceasefire or prisoner exchange. Israel is the IDF have killed more hostages than they've rescued. But Palestinian life wasn't even mentioned. It wasn't like they were going, why have you taken so long? Why after so many deaths, after the total destruction of Gaza, do you see what I mean? That wasn't even the framing. So what's so ludicrous is you've got a media world and you've got public opinion, and actually I'm treated as I'm a deranged fringe extremist. But you know, in some ways that's true. No, but I'm direct, you know, but in terms of public opinion on this, that's not. I'm just what the mainstream position is. They're the ones on the extreme. Like, why are we being treated as extremists? How is this possible? It's like they're like, how are they trying to keep a moral high ground? They're literally cheering on. So what is now on trial for on the highest court on earth for genocide, alleged genocide.
Yes.
That literally 14,000 children, and they're still like these preening, self-righteous. Aren't we moderate and mainstream? These people are the hateful, deranged extremists. It's like the world turned upside down. It is just so ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? Do you take a step back? You're like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
what the fuck?
Yeah. It's one of the reasons that I think you know, people are seeking out anything outside of mainstream media because you are seeing so many people. It's like the number one comment that I get from people who watch this show, which is a dumb show about funny Israeli propaganda. But the number one comment I get is thank you for making me feel sane. And I feel like you probably relate to that in as well. The idea of people who are just grateful to watch someone look at obvious, like the most obvious manufacturing of consent, the most obvious lies, and just be like, those are lies. Like it is
exactly. That's it. Exactly that. These, for me, people like you keep me. I would have gone insane otherwise, because it's literally like you have this debate, which is Israel is defending itself, and there was a side debate about whether is this proportional or not. Let's agree to disagree. When the Israeli state is just screaming, "We're committing war crimes, everyone! War crimes!" It's like you get like in the moment, like someone posted like, "Why are these IDF soldiers like? Oh my god, is there a breakdown of discipline? Like, why are they posting this shit?" It's like maybe because the Israeli defense minister on October the 10th and then October the 12th said, "I'm lifting all restraints and restrictions on the Israeli army." To directly to maybe that's a clue. I don't know. Worth
to
looking
their
at.
faces.
Worth looking
told
at.
Them. Yeah, it is, and
like
it's
worth
so crazy.
talking about.
Yeah, it is. It is like, and the fact that the media narrative around this seems to be, especially recently now that I've seen a bunch of commentary about this, including from inside of Israel. Like, hey guys, what are we doing? Letting Israeli soldiers make these videos, like it's making this look like some sort of genocide. And I'm just like, what do you mean? It making it look? How much evidence do you need before you're just like, maybe I'm running cover for a genocide currently?
I know, it's like, it's really bad PR, guys. Could you take it off camera? Come on. I know it's fun.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. It's like, I mean, this whole thing, you'd hope history will, I mean, because it's just so extreme and deranged. It's literally like they've rained hellfire and wiped out 70% of homes, displaced almost the entire population, killed and counting through violent deaths 35,000 people, including 14,000 kids. Clearly, in these horrors, famine, collapse of healthcare system, that's what ends up killing most people. It's a horrible thing to talk about. This is true. And you have Israeli soldiers just laughing hysterically and going on about how amazing and funny it is. And the Israeli leadership who keep saying things like, we need to wipe Gaza out. These are human animals. Let's quote a genocidal passage from the Bible, by the way, and no reason to bring that up. And whilst Israeli media outlets and TV go on about how all civilians, there's no such thing as innocent civilians, with the caveat maybe people under the age of 4 might not be guilty. You just kind of look at it and go like, what? There's not subtlety, is there? It's not subtle. Yeah. And yet we have to pretend that this is people in the media hasn't framed it based on what is actually said and done.
Yeah, it's I think it's the level of being lied to. It's like, it's not just, it's not just spin, but it's the complete inversion of reality to a degree in which you are just, you're watching someone do a crime and say, it's the Eric Andre meme where he's like shooting, shoots Hannibal Buress, and it's just, and it says Israel. He goes, why would Hamas do this? Like, we are watching that. They're acting out the memes, and I think it is why people are like, they're like looking for a normal. Like a normal people to just say what's happening because they can't believe their eyes. Why not just take literally what they say? Is what I think that's the key point. One of my main takeaways would be like, if the Russians, when the Russian state says terrible shit, people go, well, they mean that, don't they? Why have they? Like, fine, that's an entirely reasonable way to behave. Like, if a state keeps saying things over and over again, which are clearly genocidal in nature, just objectively speaking. And that's the other thing about it. When they say, don't be fucking ridiculous, how dare you say it's genocide? The people saying that, if this was a state which was hostile to Western interests, whose leaders were saying these things and doing this, there would not be a debate. There wouldn't be a discussion at all. It would be classified as a genocide, obviously, because however awful I think what's happening to Ukraine. Yeah, we would have made up reasons, actually. Like, you don't need them to say explicitly. If they're an enemy of Western interests, they don't need to say explicitly they're going to murder people. No. They would we would invent reasons to do it. But because they're an ally, they can literally say, let's get a genociding, guys. And no one says anything. Yeah. It is wild. It
sucks.
Yeah, it sucks. But you know what doesn't suck? You. Owen Jones. The work
Right
you do.
back at you.
Hey, I love the
Oh,
work
that's hit
you
and miss.
do. You do. Nah, I see all the hits, and if if a video.
There's a few misses. There's a few misses sneaking around.
Listen,
I
everyone's
try.
got a miss.
I'm a trier.
Yeah, you know what? You're a try-hard. No, I'm kidding.
I'm a try-hard.
No, I'm a
try-hard.
try-hard too. But I really appreciate what you do. Plug yourself. Where can people find your work?
If they want to hear my inane, quasi Northern English accent and my sort of Macaulay Culkin tribute act face,
It's a beautiful
they
face.
could. Where is it though? YouTube. You should look up Owen Jones on YouTube. I do write for The Guardian, or they could just listen to my increasingly deranged tweets on Twitter. Owen Jones.
You've got great tweets. Your YouTube channel is great. Love your work, and thank you so much for coming on Bad Hasbara.
But right back at you, by the way. You are, by the way, just incredible. I would say very, because I'd seen you before you got in touch, and it's just like that combination. Because for me, I think like comedy is often there's a reason dictators often go for satirists.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you know, fingers crossed things don't go completely down south because you're finished if that's true. But I mean,
I know,
because it's. But making like injustice and horror absurd is something which obviously a skillful comedian can do in a way that really gets people emotionally. So well done, you're great. So well done. Yeah, well we've patted each other on the back there, haven't we? This is
I
disgusting.
love it. Oh no, it's great. I only compliment so I could receive them back. Love me. But thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Owen Jones, everyone, please follow him. And follow this podcast on all your podcast apps. Join the Patreon, patreon.com/badhasbara. Email me, badhasbara@gmail.com. And until next time, let's see. From the river to the sea, Piers Morgan has no soul.